Yeah, sounds good. I'll keep it brief. My name's Alex. I am a freelance artist in Illustrator. I've been working as a freelancer for about 12 plus years now. So, I do a mix of hand painted works as well as digital works, anything from murals to t-shirt designs and, tour posters, whatever it is. So, lucky to work with some exciting clients over the years as well. So, yeah, that's pretty much me.
Awesome, man. Well, that's great. Well, let's have a look at a little bit of your work. So I'll show this up. Do you want to pick a project or something?
Yeah, sure. So this is my website. I'll pick a digital one. That makes sense for today. I'll go to this one. This is a more recent one. This is a poster I just did for the Queens of the Stone Age Australian tour earlier this year.
Cool.
I guess it's a good representation of my work. I like to combine a whole bunch of different elements, a mixture of imagery, typography, patterns, whatever it is. And I also like to stick to sort of a minimal color palette.
Yeah.
More often than not, I use sort of the gray tones to break up whatever colors I've decided to use. So I guess that's my style. This particular one was pretty much an open brief, just create something fun for their tour. This was for their Brisbane show.
Awesome.
I guess the only direction was to sort of their current branding for their latest album had sort of a very dark, violent sort of look, if you like. So I wanted to take that but give it a bit more of a comical twist, which is what I like to do. So had a lot of fun with it. It's I love doing statues, skulls, quirky other bits and pieces. So this was right up my alley. So,
how long do they give you for a project like this? Like, what's the time frame?
How long? Look, it was a pretty long lead, to be honest, which is quite rare. But I think in terms of my time, I think I turned it around. Concept took maybe 3 or 4 days, and then the final art took maybe about the same sort of time, to be honest.
Nice.
It always takes a long time. To do the digital aspect of it for the final piece. So maybe a 7-day working week, if you like.
Cool.
And I'm very particular. Like, I have to get the concept right before I send it off. I've got to make sure things, if I'm not happy with it, then it doesn't matter what anyone else says. If I'm not happy with it, then I'll never be happy with it. So
Okay. I love how you've snuck the Alex Lehours in there. I can see that.
Oh yeah,
I see that.
That's become a bit of a feature throughout, especially with my digital stuff. I'm actually surprised they let that go, to be honest.
I was going to say, has anyone ever picked you up? Like, hey, what's that?
No, maybe they just don't notice it or don't care. But I sneak it in everywhere I can. So
that's cool.
It's become a little bit of a trademark now. So why not?
I love it, dude. Okay, that's great. Sorry, my audio to everyone if it was sounding a bit weird. It should be sorted now. There we go. You get to hear my fantastic voice. Well, Alex, let's jump into it. As we know, time always goes so fast in these things, but we were, It
does. Yeah, cool.
Let's jump across
all that stuff. So I guess today I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of my process for a digital piece from start to finish, based on a brief. So what I'll do, I'll open up the work in question. So this is something I created actually for Adobe a month or so ago.
Oh yeah.
Just used for some campaigns to advertise Adobe and Adobe Express online. So I guess the brief for this would be create something that sort of depicts you and your work, what best represents your work. So like I said before, I love statues. I love including animals, all sorts of completely random things, then bring it together. So I guess today I'm going to talk about how I would come up with a composition like this, talk about, I guess the research, brainstorming, why I've included certain things, and then get into how I sketch them from, I used to use pen and paper, but I've since moved into Photoshop to do my sketching, and then bringing it into Illustrator to create the final art. So we'll see how far we get today, but a fair bit to cover, but it should be fun. So like I said, this is the art that I came up with. It's a combination of stuff I'd already had drawn, new things I've drawn, and I thought it was a good representation of the work that I usually create. So I guess the first thing we start with is, and this sort of stuff I'll just do very, very quickly, is basically what I do before any job. I just write down a bunch of things that I like, that whether if it's a client-based job, if it's a personal project, I always start pen and paper and just jot down a bunch of ideas, what I think could work for that particular piece. For this one, I wanted a central sort of figure, and I wanted something strong and bold. So I basically start with, I guess, a rough outline of, I knew I was going to have it on a square template, and I sort of, I wanted that sort of exploding, floating look. So I literally just, with the pen tool, very simply just sort of sketch up a very, very rough sort of, how I want it to sort of look. I had this idea in mind of having like this lion, like a winged lion statue, but the wings sort of coming out behind the head. So I knew I sort of wanted that shape. So again, I would just sort of quickly map out a very rough thing of how it would fit like that. And then basically just, fill it with all sorts of other stuff. To be honest, a lot of the time I know what the central thing is going to be. I have no idea maybe what the support imagery would be,
right?
Until I start working on the project. If it's a client-based brief and they have specific theme, obviously I have a better idea of some of the things that I can include. But for this one, it was very much, what can I put in there that would represent my work best as a digital illustrator. So,
which type of brief do you prefer working on? One where you're given a lot of direction and lots of kind of individual assets to kind of put into the composition, or do you prefer it when someone says, hey Alex, I really like your work, do whatever you want?
I guess a bit of both.
Yeah.
It's great when you get those jobs where they, you can do what you want, but it's like, where do you start? I love a brief, that has a theme, but the client isn't too particular. I love thinking of different ideas sort of a little bit outside the box, or maybe a little bit random for maybe what the client's thinking, but a lot of the time it can work, and it might be something that they haven't thought of themselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I say sometimes, a lot of the time it does get sort of shot back and rejected. So, stick to, the more literal meaning of what we're doing. So yeah, any sort of general theme is always great, because it does help narrow down, what sort of research you need to do, what sort of imagery you're going to include. And then from there, I try and think of maybe some different ideas that are a bit more far-fetched, or, something that maybe doesn't quite fit, but when it all works together, it sort of works in harmony. So I guess a bit of both. I've definitely had briefs before where, it's too much tailored to the client. They're the ones paying the bill, so I get it. But it just becomes not fun anymore, and you end up just doing it because, that's just what you have to do to get the job done. Yeah. So basically, I'll just show you what I'm going to do first. I'll get up the final artwork. I'm going to focus on today this big lion guy in the middle. And then this mascot here is actually my French bulldog Ziggy, who usually sleeps at my feet. A few years ago, I decided, I need to create him into my mascot, because he's always with me. I'm always plugging him on Instagram and those sorts of things. So he's now become my sort of mascot. Yeah. And the reason I wanted to focus on these two today is because they're quite, even though it's all digital and flat color and vector based, it's quite a different style of illustration. So obviously here, a little bit more detail, and here's a bit more of that sort of logo mascot sort of scaled back look. So, and again, even though the way I work is very similar in Illustrator, there are differences. So I thought that could be quite cool to show those. But I might start. So what I do, like I said, I used to sketch everything by hand, which is good, and I still do to some regard. But now most of the stuff I do is in Photoshop, purely because when you're working on a bunch of jobs, everything's about time. If I had all the time in the world to sketch things, that's great. But the reality is you don't. And then if the client wants to change, you've then got to start the drawing again, fresh. So yeah, I figured, yeah, it'd be best
You made
to
the jump. You made the jump.
start
Fully
doing it in
digital.
Photoshop. Yeah, I did make the jump. I have to say, Photoshop used to really scare me. Really, really scare me.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, yeah. So what I do is I use references all the time. I've never been that skilled that I can just draw something from inside my head. I'll have a general idea of how I want it to look, but in terms of details, lighting, and all that sort of stuff, I do like to use a reference. Even when I'm painting on site, I'll have reference images like a lot of artists do to, get the right lighting, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, cool.
But at the same time, I don't want to just trace what I'm doing. I want to make it my own. So this is an image that I actually put together using Adobe Express, and I can touch on that later, where I just searched for, like, I knew I wanted this lion head, I knew I wanted wings, but it's not quite how I want it, but it's a good starting point as a reference. So I put that together in Adobe Express, opened it up in Photoshop with my layers here. What I'll do as well, I'll show you how I do it in Photoshop, but I can also show you the original sketch that I actually drew a few years ago by hand. So what I do, actually, this layer here, I'll just reduce the opacity a bit so I can see what I'm doing. What I do first, in sort of a completely, maybe a bright color like red, I kind of just use my brush, and I just use, these are the two brushes I like to use. I'll probably go the more soft brush for this because it is a sketch. So all I do is just quickly work out, where the eyes might sit, the nose, that sort of thing. Again, it's great doing this by hand, but when you're in I wouldn't say a rush, but when you just want to get something done relatively quicker, this is a good way of doing it, I find. Because a lot of the time I'll draw something and then realize that I don't actually like it, or it doesn't quite work for what I need.
Right.
So yeah, so that's why. So I just do a very rough sort of thing where things sit in here. I don't particularly like the way the wings are. I wanted them sort of more flat, so I sort of bring that out a bit. And again, this is just sort of a rough guide. It's not exactly what I want at the moment.
Yeah, cool.
And I wanted it more. Yeah. So again, I won't play around with this too much, but it's more just a very, very rough thing. And then from there, I can start. There we go. That should do. That'll be enough. And then from there, I just turn this layer off. I might actually. No,
you're gonna copy that wing for maximum efficiency?
Yeah. So that's what I'll do. I'll draw this first, and then at the end, if I'm happy with that wing, maybe copy it and then change some of the details slightly, or the lighting, because I always like to have sort of, I guess, more of a dramatic light. So I might use I think for this side, I'll use the right as sort of my shadows, and the left will be more of the light coming in, so you get less details there. So I've got that layer there. I might lock it just so it, actually no, it should be fine. No, I'll lock it. And then, so basically from here, I just start drawing, how I sort of envision it. I want this to have that sort of statue look. And again, I'm just doing this very rough, because in Illustrator, that's where I'll fix up, all the line work and everything like that. For today's, obviously, I'm not going to bore you by sketching this thing, for hours on end, because I can play around with it. So I'll use, I'll go back to my original sketch for today's Illustrator part. But for now, I just wanted to show you how I sort of piece it together. And again, I didn't love references in that original lion image that I put together in Express. So I'm sort of just sketching it. And I always, the way I sort of envision it, I always start with the eyes as well. I feel like some people like to do all the other detail and eyes later. But I prefer to go with the eyes and then work my way out.
That's cool. That's interesting. And I'm surprised that you don't have the reference image up anymore. So you've taken that away like quite quickly for this part.
I do. Look, every now and then I might turn it back on just to go, okay, I've missed, that could be cool there. But I do like to kind of draw what I can in my head as much. I do get to a point, and I'm not going to lie, when I struggle, I'm like, yeah, I need that reference back. But sometimes I find the reference is a bit too distracting. But yeah, it might be like up with the hair, for example, or sorry, the mane, not the hair. I want to find more direct lines, so I might, bring that in there to start with, like that, and then, and then from there I can turn it back off again, and now I've got more of a guide. I want that to come like that a bit more. And again, I've only started using Photoshop maybe in the last year and a half for my sketching. So even like using Photoshop is quite new to me for this sort of thing. So, but it's great. Like it's, the fact that you can, you make a mistake, you just change a layer, or delete it.
Yeah, or, Command Z in real life.
Copy and paste, and yeah.
So so what was your previous process? So, like, would you sketch on paper and then scan it in, or even take a photo? Like, what was that?
Yeah,
step?
pretty much. Actually, while we're chatting about that, I've got, so this was the original, that's the original sketch. I don't know if,
yeah, cool.
You probably can't see that. I need to get it up somewhere. Hang on. I've got it somewhere. The original sketch, I will find it somewhere. I've got it. Here we go.
Right.
So you can see it's just a pen sort of drawing. I sketched it in pencil first, refined it with pen, scanned it in, and then, in Photoshop got rid of the outline.
Right.
Yeah, which was great. It worked really well, but it was I think even with that one, I probably drew it maybe 2 or 3 times before I was happy with it.
Yeah, okay.
So it does take a lot of time when you're trying to, draw things at a relatively fast pace. It can take a lot of time. So I basically exactly what I'm doing now. I would do this with pen and paper or pencil and paper to begin with. I did still every now and then I would sort of like print out that sort of template image, if you like. Use a light box to trace the general shape, like what I've done on this red layer, and then draw it by hand. But then and everyone kept saying, why aren't you using Photoshop or something like this to do your sketching? I was like, I do enjoy that hand feel that you get, still using pen, paper, pencil and paper, whatever it is, because we're going to lose that, very quickly in a few years' time. Like it's all digital now, which is great. And then I finally got back onto the Photoshop bandwagon, and I've actually really enjoyed it. Yeah, really enjoyed it. So
nice.
Yeah, it's been it's just a game changer for my work anyway. Not every, most people, some people may not have the same sort of view on it, but for me, for my style of work, it's a much easier thing.
Well, it's
and
hard.
What I can even do is I know I'm sort of drawing both sides.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I was going to say, well, it's hard for us to give up, I think, for all of us to give up something that's been part of our process for a long time. I mean, how long were you saying you've been doing this for? Like 15 years or something? Like it's really tough to...
12.
12, yeah.
Just over 12, yeah. But it is, like it's, you do get used to, and for a long time I didn't even think about using Photoshop. It's just was second nature. I'm going to draw something, I'll start with pen and paper. Not for everything. For a lot of obviously the type-based stuff that I include in my work, I would go straight into Illustrator and create something there. Or if I was creating emblems or logos, I wouldn't always draw, but for more, I guess, illustrative stuff like this, I would, definitely just go to pen and paper to begin with. So, So look, this is, I mean, I could spend hours doing this now and trying to refine it and all that sort of stuff, but I'm going to try and just speed it up a little bit. Because I guess the main thing I want to show everyone today is how I take it from here and then work on it in Illustrator. So I turn things off like that. I mean, sketching like this still is just as time consuming as doing it by pen and paper, but again, you've got that luxury of if you need to make an adjustment where you're not happy with a line that you've done, you can just go back and fix it from there. So
and do you ever during your sketching process,
what I might do,
sorry mate, do you during the sketching process, do you ever think about like where the light is coming from? Because this is obviously a 3D thing. Like a sculpture obviously has lots of depth in the crevices and things like that. Are you always drawing like the
Yeah,
light
yeah,
coming from one
absolutely.
side
So,
or the shadows and stuff?
yeah, definitely. So for this one, I've decided everything on the right will be the darker shadow sort of part, and then the left will have, I guess, less detail. But yeah, I always like that sort of dramatic feel. Yeah. So yeah, having that dramatic light. I think especially with my style, my style is very flat. So in terms of my digital work, so I need something like that dramatic light to give it that extra sort of element or that different dynamic. So I feel like that's really important to what I do. So yeah, so look, this is, again, I don't want to spend too much time here sketching up because I could go back and forth and change things. So what I might do is go back over to this sketch. So you can see it's even, like I might change these windows. You can already see it's a little bit different to, where it ended up as a sketch, but this is exactly how I started with pen and paper. So what I'll do, I just drag the Photoshop file into Illustrator. It's I'm drawing over the top, so don't need to do anything. It's just a single flat image. I've actually set up a folder or a file here, I should say, for my final elements. So what I do in any job that I'm working on, before I put the whole composition together, I like to create each individual element, illustration, whatever it is, separately. And then that way, when I'm putting the composition together, I can actually just pick and choose and move things around. So what I do, I bring my sketch over from Photoshop. You can see.
So is that a PNG?
And then
Would that be a PNG at the moment?
That was just a Photoshop file that I've dragged straight into Illustrator. Cool. So I think it's just it could be. It'd be similar to a PNG, but I'm lazy. I just save the Photoshop file and drag it straight in.
Nice.
And then what I do in here, I put all the actual sketches on a base layer. I might change the opacity a little bit, very much like I did in Photoshop, and then lock that layer, and then I'll call this details or something like that. And then I start drawing. So I have over here 3 brushes that I've set up in Illustrator, which give you that sort of nice pointed line that I like to work with. And I literally now I'm just tracing what I need. Sorry, I need to just change the tints.
What did you change there?
Yeah, and I play around with this. So basically, when I first created these brushes, I double click on the brush. I created it in navy for whatever reason.
Right.
And then so basically what that means is anything I draw with those brushes, no matter what color I select over here, will stay navy. Oh. But if I want to change these brushes, I click tints. So I apply that. So whatever color now I select, my brush will change to that color, basically. I don't know why I ever set it up in navy to begin with. There was a reason, but yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah, so and I just play around with different stroke lengths. What I do is the way I draw is I pretty much do what I can with these brushes in terms of, I almost use it like it is a brush. And I just play around with the different strokes and that sort of thing until I'm happy with how it looks. This is probably the time-consuming part because I am mucking around with the strokes and that sort of thing all the time. And then so I might just do this section. Once I'm happy with this, I then come over to with the paintbrush, the blob brush, which basically, if you color in or draw a shape and then delete the inside of that shape, it becomes a filled in vector shape, if you like, rather than, and then the beauty of this brush is if you've got that there, select it again, and I start drawing other things around here, that now becomes all one shape. Like it just
Right.
automatically connects to each other. I found it's just, for what I do, it's a very quick, easy way to color in the large areas. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'll go back to my normal brush tool. Yeah. So yeah, and like I say, I'm just going through tracing the edges of this and then filling it in. For certain parts, I don't want it all to have these sorts of sharp lines. So I've got another brush that I've created that's got more of that sort of rounded edge, which for certain things, might work better. And again, for whatever reason, I've got to change the tints on that. There we go. Yeah, so for me, it's just going back and forth using my 3 different brushes. Every now and then, if I'm lazy, I'll just stroke away with the brushes to fill little sections rather than using that blob tool. But I almost use it just to go around the edge. If there's any lines in the sketch that I want to, not particularly happy with, or sharpen up or change, obviously you can do that in Illustrator. And then just fill it in. So again, we'll be here for a long time if I draw this whole thing. But I guess the important thing for my work is that first initial sketch, whether it is on paper with pen and pencil or if it's in Photoshop. If I get that sort of final refined sketch to a point that I'm happy with, then when I bring it into Illustrator, it is the time consuming part, but it's the easy part because it's I'm literally just tracing these lines that I've already set up, playing around with the different brush strokes, and going from there.
And because you could be
fooled
into thinking that your artwork is done in Photoshop, right? Like from a distance, but it's actually created in Illustrator.
Yeah, it is. And look, everyone's got their own different style. There's a lot of brushes out there in both Photoshop and Illustrator these days where you can get more of that age look, more of that feathered brush look, to make it look like even more that it's been done in by hand on a bit of canvas or whatever. But for my work, I enjoy that sort of more flat, bold color, real vector light looking stuff. I have mucked around with other brushes and things like that to give it that sort of vintagey age look. But yeah, for what I do, it's I much prefer this sort of thing for my style. So what I'll do, again, because we're already at 12:30, I will, like the good old cooking shows that we were talking about earlier, I'll go to the finished. So yeah, this is now, and I can pull it apart. I think I've actually attached it, so you can see very similar to what I was doing before with the different brushes and that sort of thing. Where were we before? Yeah, so very, very similar. So what I'll do.
Yeah, wow. So how long does something like that take?
So the way I work, this one probably took me close to a day to finish, to be honest. Maybe like a good 5-6 hours, just maybe not a full day, but 5-6. It took a long time, because I draw, I'm zoomed in, drawing the eye or whatever. I zoom out. Okay, look at it, make sure I'm happy. No, I fix that, thicken the stroke here and there. I mean, it's sort of that. It's the beauty of these digital programs, but also the curse at the same time, because you can manipulate it so much. It gets to a point like, what am I going to be happy with? So, I look at a stroke, for example, like, oh, it needs to be thicker. When that's printed out or enlarged to this sort of scale, is it going to be too thick? Is it going to be too thin? And you can muck around like that back and forth for so long. So it's like when you paint, like when you draw, it just gets to a point where you have to just, I'm happy with that, leave it alone and move on. So yeah, it does take a few hours. But it's all part of the love, part of the process. So what I do, you can see here from my pre-made version, I basically, for these final illustrations, I create everything in layers. So I've got my final one, so I'll close that. That's the final one that I'm going to use for this artwork that I created before. that's my black detail outlines. But then I want it to have, you know, some shadows, highlights, all that sort of thing. So I'll just show you guys how, again, same sort of process. The fact that I've got it on layers means I can lock that layer, draw what I need to draw underneath without it affecting, you know, any of the black detail.
Yeah.
And like I said, yeah, so you can see obviously everything is got that shadow look on the right side. So I'm going to start sort of, again, just putting in some shadows with the same brushes, just change to that sort of red color that I want to use. And if I might use the blob tool to start with. Yeah, so I use the blob tool with a very small sort of stroke, and it's almost like I'm drawing in some rough shapes to see where the light would look good. And then coming back over with my brushes just to sort of sharpen up some of the edges and, you know, change the, I should zoom in a bit, sorry, and just change the angles and that sort of thing. So I can delete that, then go back to my normal brush tool.
That's cool. Yeah, you can see how quickly you can change all that.
That's it, yeah. And again, I like to, you know, I guess like a lot of illustrators at NARS do, you work on different layers, and it just makes life that much easier if you do ever need to change anything. Yeah, so yeah, this is pretty much the process of how I take my sketches to digital and then, you know, refine it in Illustrator. And again, I just want everything to sort of have that shadow from that side. So everything over this side is pretty much going to be, all in here will be red basically, just to thicken that up. So with this blob tool, it's great. So you can draw your shape, you know, all in here. I want that to be quite dark. So I just sort of rough in this large shape. And that now becomes an object, and I can just delete the inside of that. And already I can start to see that, okay, you know, that adds a bit more drama to the whole thing.
Totally.
Yeah, so, and I'll turn that layer on. So yeah, that was the final one.
So cool.
From before. So he's basically ready to go. Yeah, I'll just touch on quickly another, my Ziggy mascot, I guess, the same sort of process.
Oh, yeah, let's see Ziggy.
Different. And then I can, yeah, Ziggy. I mean, yeah, I save that. I'm biased, but you know, he's my favorite. So I'll go back to the other thing I should have touched on earlier. I'm sure a lot of people like this. I break everything up into folders. So I've got my, you know, all these research images, you know, that I get from stock sites, scans from books, all that sort of stuff. And then I put it in folders so it's nice and clear. This is the original image of
how good's that
my
photo?
Ziggy. I took one day, he was in the back of the car. I thought, oh yeah, he looks cute. And then when I was wanting to draw him for my mascot, I remembered that photo. I was like, yep, cool. I want that sort of front on look. He can look quite sad a lot of the time. So yeah, I thought that was quite happy, big beady eyes. So, and quite symmetrical. Yeah, so what I'll do, I've got some other layers here that I've already sketched up. So what I've done, I cropped his head out because I knew I wanted it, and I've lowered the opacity. And for this one, same deal, go to another layer with my brush tool in Photoshop. Yeah, I'll do the rounded, oops, sorry, change the, and now this I will use, for something like this, I will use the photo to almost draw over, because I wanted a lot more simplified look. I'm obviously not doing something that's got a lot of detail. I want that very minimal logo sort of look to it. And I want to follow, you know, the lines and the features that sort of make him really. So,
yeah, if you go too far off, it's not going to look like Ziggy anymore.
Big beady eyes. Exactly. And it did take me a while to get this right, to be honest. Like I was trying to draw it too close to what he actually looks like. And it just wasn't, it just wasn't him. So, so I pretty much just used the photo as a very rough guide. Very different to the other way I was doing it, where with the lion, I started off with the, I've closed it. I started off with the red lines, that really rough sketch. Because I feel like something like that, I can be a bit more loose, a bit more free. Whereas something like this, I need it to look, somewhat like him. I mean, most people won't, no one will know what he actually looks like. But for me, I wanted it to look as much like my dog as possible.
Yeah.
So I just find some of the, some of the details and features that I think will work to make it look like him. But yeah, same deal. Sketch it in Photoshop, and then I'll take it into Illustrator. I'll turn that off just to see how it's looking. Yeah, so it's obviously a lot more simplified. He's got some, a lot of folds. I guess one of the big features of him is his big droopy face. I want to make sure I get that right. He's got a lot of different folds and.
How long have you had?
I guess flab on his face.
How long have you had Ziggy around for?
He's 5 now, and we've had him as a puppy since he was a puppy. So yeah, he's been around for 5 years. So yeah, he's featured in a lot of my work.
Oh, that was my follow-up. How many pieces of artwork have you managed to get him into?
Well, in my personal stuff, I try to get him in a fair bit, maybe with with different poses. So I use this head that I've created as sort of the go-to sort of head, and then I might change a pose here and there. One of the ones I'm really proud of is I was actually able to get him. I painted a wall for one of the Foot Locker Australia stores here in Sydney a few years ago, and I included him as a mascot, which they approved. So he's a permanent feature over at one of the big shopping malls here.
Awesome.
And a few of my friends have actually stopped by the wall. They don't really care much about the rest of the artwork, but they take a photo with Ziggy. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, he's a permanent feature now at one of the main shopping centers here, which is quite cool. So again, one of those things with a client, you sort of throw something in there and see what they say, and they were happy with it. So
that's awesome.
Again, I want this to look very, very like bold line, really thick, that sort of thing. I could do that mirrored look where everything is mirrored on to the other side, but because his features are somewhat different on the other side of his face, I'll draw it like this, and then I can sort of give it a bit more symmetry when I take it into Illustrator.
Because this is like a realistic.
But yeah, I basically just sketch it like this.
It's like a realistic thing, right? Like human faces aren't actually symmetrical, so it actually can look quite weird if you're going for a bit of a realistic look and everything is perfectly symmetrical. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, for something like this, I do want that symmetrical look because it is more of that cartoony, almost like a logo, if you like. But for the sketch, I'll just do it like this. Anyway, I don't want to take too much time doing it like this in here. Might just give him some of his. So yeah, I'll so that's where wrong layer. That's where I got to with that. I did sketch him earlier, so there's that again. I think originally, that was there. I did that one in Photoshop because again, a lot of the sketches I have on file are in, I've got these big portfolios and it's got hundreds of bits of paper that have sketches from all sorts of jobs. So I forget now what I've got on file on the computer and what I've got to scan in from old sketches. So this was one I sketched in Photoshop, same sort of deal. And so same thing again. I'll save that. I might just close Photoshop altogether now. There we go. And then I'll bring. So this was that's the final vector stuff that I've drawn, but I'll bring it in and show you. And again, same sort of thing. Every color, every whatever detail other than the black is on a separate layer, just because it's easy to play around with. So I'll go back to my images. Sorry, bear with me. Too many folders, and then I no, sorry, not paying attention. Again, bring it in as a flat image.
Also, chat, if anyone has a question, any questions as we're going today, throw them in chat as well.
Cool. So he's here. I wanted to show how I sketch his body as well in Photoshop, but I think today I might run out of time for that. Maybe I can quickly go back to that. But so I've got his head ready to go here. I'll move him up. And then in Photoshop, I guess this is where the hand-drawn aspect does come into play. I don't know if you guys have seen like those sorts of vintage, college team mascots from the States. They've got their crocodile or their French bulldog or whatever it is, sort of leaning on something or running with a flag, that sort of look. So I want something like that. And this one I wanted him, leaning on. I had this idea because it was something for me, holding a paintbrush, holding a spray can, and maybe leaning on like a pile of bricks. That was the general idea. So I sort of, actually I might do it in a different color so I can see. Yeah, so for this, I knew I wanted it, that sort of leaned look. I had this in, whatever it was here. Sometimes I do it on the letter of the team or the college or whatever, but I thought, I'll have him on some bricks, holding whatever. So I sketch him, and I wasn't quite sure. This again is very, so that can be the spray can sort of here, and I refine it in my next
like holding
layer.
a spray can. That's what spray can.
I want him sort of, yeah, exactly. And I sort of want his body to come like that sort of thing. So he does have a bit of muscle on him. So
I was going to say he's ripped.
To come through.
I've got a question from chat, Alex.
Yeah, he's a chunky boy.
What's Alex's favorite toy he's got in his study?
No.
It's from Jeremy Lloyd.
Yeah, I have a lot of toys in here. Good question. I guess, I've got a lot in there. I like my Astro Boy sitting behind there.
Astro Boy is super cool.
I wanted one of like an Astro Boy for years, and I just never found what I wanted. And then we were on holiday. Where were we? We were on holiday in the Blue Mountains here in Sydney, and I came across him in this random store, pounced on him. The other one I love is my Buzz. I've got a Buzz Lightyear. I don't know if he's in the back there too.
I can just see that. It might
Toy
be hard
Story
for other people on their screens, but I can just see it now.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
He's featured all the way back there. A Buzz Lightyear. Wanted one for years, never got one as a kid, and then my wife for my 30th birthday bought me a Buzz Lightyear. So
that's cool.
I think the movie came out when I was 10. So 20 years later, I got my Buzz Lightyear. So he's and of course, I got a young daughter now. She always wants to play with it, but I'm like, no, that one's off limits. You've got your own toys to play with. So so that's how I sort of roughly sketch up, his body based on his head, and then have these bricks sort of sitting here, that sort of thing. And then once, like the line, what I'll do now is I'll come with another layer over the top with black to really refine these red lines and get the shape and everything right. And then bring it in over to Illustrator. I'll reduce the opacity again. Now when I'm drawing stuff like this, it is slightly different to the way I did the other one. What I'll use is just either the pencil tool or the pen tool, because I want sort of a more what's the word, that more symmetrical look. I'll start with the pen tool to get those sorts of shapes, but then I'll come back in over the top with those brushes that I created to, you know, change the thickness of certain areas of the lines and that sort of thing. And then I do a combination of pen tool and pencil tool, maybe change the thickness a bit just to start, because I like everything being its own shape, if that makes sense. So I want this I want his head to be a completely separate shape to the body when I draw that. So I just go around, and again I want it symmetrical, but not, I guess, not too symmetrical at the same time. So actually what I'll do, I'll go like that. There we go. Yeah, so I start like that, and then I come back in with my brushes. Yeah, and then, you know, sort of thicken up some lines that I feel need to, you know, I don't want the same stroke width everywhere across the thing. So
yeah,
I guess starting with the pen tool just gives me that guide. Yeah, and that's pretty much the process of how I draw stuff. I think we may run out of time today for me to show how I piece everything together once I've got everything drawn in Illustrator like this. But I guess I can spend some time on that tomorrow.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we do only have 5 minutes left today.
Is, I'll just, yeah. So what I'll show is, I think I already have that open, the final elements. Nope, that's not the one. Yeah, so this is the final thing. So what I was saying before, so that's Ziggy separate. That line is a separate object. The skull that I've drawn, my logo, everything here has been drawn completely separate and grouped together. It's all vector. And then I go back to that original template, my good old rough thing here, and what I'll have is a file full of where was it? I can't remember. I saved it. I'm not going to waste time with that now. But I have a file, and I basically have all the elements that I've drawn on the side like this. So if we take it to that other one, my template, I've got that. I'll lock that layer. Start with another layer. Bring it over. And yeah, just start. Once I've got this main guy drawn, like I said earlier, I never quite know what I want to include until I start working on it. To a degree, obviously, like, again, if there's a theme, I'll have some ideas, but I find like the way, as I start piecing this composition together, ideas evolve. You know, you think, oh, I might try this, or I've been drawing this for a while. What if another idea might spark, and what if I try it? So yeah, so I know I've got him as my central feature. And then from there, I start filling in this area. I don't want to obviously go all the way to the edges, but yeah, and then from there, I start, you know, whatever elements I've drawn, I'll start piecing it together. I do generally have an idea, like if I want a flower here, I know it's going to sit there. I don't know what flower, I don't know what shape it's going to be, but sort of roughly in that area, and I start playing around with that. And it just sort of evolves from there. So, but again, I can touch more on that sort of stuff tomorrow. Today, I just wanted to show how I get the artwork from A to B. Really. So,
that was really cool. Yeah, it was very interesting, the different like styles that you were going for and how the process changed as well.
Yeah, so I guess I've always liked different styles of art, and I guess my art is a bunch of different styles and completely different things coming together. Yeah, and with that, the way I draw, the way I paint, whatever it is, changes as well. So I guess it's this whole process of different things coming together.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, we might leave it there. Thank you so much, Alex, and we'll be back at the exact same time. It's 12 o'clock Sydney time that we'll be back, but exactly the same time tomorrow. We'll be back, and we'll also have the fantastic Jeremy Lord right after as well, so you can stick around. We've got 2 hours of some good stuff. Alex, thank you so much. It was super awesome, and I'm really looking forward to tomorrow.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.